As for HIRA, we have declared this month a safety during shutdown month. So our webinar sessions this month, we are going to be tackling issues to do with safety on shutdowns and maintenance. Hence, this topic that we are going to be discussing today with our guests. So we're just waiting for others to join in, then we can start off. So in the meantime, I would like to thank our sponsors and partners, Tier 1, NASA, and ZIOSH for supporting this initiative and their encouragement and everything. So thank you, Tier 1, Center for Learning, and NASA. You have been making this a success. I'd like to appreciate you guys. So for today, the agenda of today, we are going to begin off with a toolbox talk on hazard identification and risk assessment. I am the one who's going to present on that. Then we'll deep dive into the topic, the discussion of the day, which is the art of executing safe shutdowns. We have a guest presenter for that one, which is Mr. DMartins. Mr. DMartins, how are you?
I'm unshakable, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Really looking forward to today's session.
Thank you. Hope it's going to be great. So, just for housekeeping rules, if you are not the one who is speaking, or if you should mute your microphone, and when you're about to speak, you should make sure that your microphone is unmuted. Then you may leave your video on if your network has got power. But for us, for network reasons, we are going to turn off our videos. Then we have a chat and comment section. If you feel like you have something to contribute, you can always make use of the chat question and answer comment section. So guys, let's enjoy this session. Looking forward for a great discussion. So I'm jumping into the toolbox talk for today. Let me quickly share it with you guys.
Thank you for that, Teach. We look forward to a wonderful presentation and learning as well. One life lost is too many, and we cannot afford. Despite it being in winter, we all need to continue taking care of ourselves, taking care of equipment. Accidents don't only happen to people, even destroying equipment is equally negative to business. So we look forward to learning a lot today. And indeed, like what you said, it's our 7th session. I've been privileged enough to attend all of them. We are growing, and we thank our sponsors for the support. Back to you, Teach.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ranga, for that. Thank you for the support you have been giving us. So in our toolbox talk today, as I have highlighted, we are going to be discussing on hazard identification and risk assessment. So one of the root causes of accidents and illnesses in our workplace is the failure to identify or recognize hazards that are present or that may be anticipated in our workplace systems. So a critical element for any safety and health program is a proactive and an ongoing identification and assessment of such hazards in our workplaces, so as to prevent and control them. So I'm going to give you a definition of what a hazard is. As in our day-to-day activities, hazard and risk are usually used interchangeably, but in the context of health and safety, we are going to distinguish them. So a hazard can be defined as any event, any situation, any circumstance that can present as a potential source of damage or harm, or that can lead to adverse effects on property, on a human being, or on materials. So there are different types of hazards, and the common ones are categorized as physical hazards. These ones are mainly environmental factors that can affect the physiology of a human being or property or environment. For instance, noise. Noise is an environmental factor that can affect your hearing, so it's a physical hazard. We also have biological hazards. These are mainly pathogens. For instance, bacteria and virus, like the one we are experiencing these days, coronavirus. That is a hazard. It is a biological hazard. Then we have chemical hazards, elements or compounds or materials that can react with equipment or that can make any reaction. Then we have economical hazards. These are physical factors that can affect also the physiology of a human being, but with main reference to the musculoskeletal of the human. And we have psychosocial hazards. These mainly impact the mental health of a human being. So now, what is a risk? A risk is defined as a chance or the likelihood that you experience adverse effects whenever you are exposed to the hazard that we have defined above. So a risk is mainly calculated with a formula that as likelihood, that is the chance of occurrence. Then we talk about severity. That is if you are exposed, what is the magnitude of the consequences that you would encounter. Then I'll jump into then define what hazard identification is. So hazard identification is mainly establishing hazards and risk factors within a system or a procedure or equipment. And how do we do this? We can do this through collection of existing information about the workplaces. For instance, whenever you receive a machinery or material, be it chemicals, those can come with a material safety data sheets. With those material safety data sheets, there is information about the safety procedures of that equipment or chemical. So you need to know all those. And you can also collect information about the previous incidents that have occurred as a way of identifying hazards within your workplace. Then inspection is also important. I think that is one of the core duties of a SHE practitioner, to conduct inspection every morning. And the main agenda of those inspections is to identify hazards. And also, as an employee, as an individual, you are also recommended to inspect your workplaces every morning before you begin to apprehend any task. So as a way of identifying hazards that are associated with your working area. Because a SHE practitioner may walk through your workstation, but they can miss out some of the hazards that are associated. But you as an individual, you know your material, you know your processes, you know your workstations. So you are the one who is aware of the hazards that are associated with your working environment. Also, accident investigation. It's another way of identifying hazard. Some of you may see this as an reactive approach of identifying hazard, but we have hazards that are defined as unforeseeable hazard that you cannot pick out during your hazard surveys or inspections. So these may tend to manifest after or as accidents. So accident investigation is very important as a way of identifying such hazards that are unforeseeable. Then whenever you are about to partake a non-routine task, that is to say a task that is mainly not associated with your day-to-day operation in your workplace. You have to conduct a task hazard analysis to identify the tasks, the hazard that are associated with that specific task. And this process of high hazard identification, it should be systematic. That is to say, if you are conducting a task hazard analysis for a non-routine task, you have to break down each and every step that are associated with the task that you are about to apprehend. Then you identify every hazard that is associated with each step that you would have stated out. Then you need all these. You do your inspections, you do your accident investigation. You don't just observe and leave it. You have to document whatever you observe, whatever you find, your findings are. So documentation is very important when identifying hazard. Then we move on to the process of risk assessment. With risk assessment, now we are talking about analyzing and evaluating the hazard that you have identified to check the likelihood of occurrence and the severity of those hazards if one is exposed to them. So to break it down, mainly risk assessment is about characterizing the nature of the hazard identified. And it is also about prioritizing the hazard and the controls to be taken to manage that hazard. And it is also done to identify the interim ways of controlling that hazard. So the hazard, the HIRA, the hazard identification and risk assessment procedure, in brief, you first have to identify the hazard with the method I've highlighted before when I talked about identifying hazard. Then you move on to risk assessment. Now with risk assessment, for instance, you would have made an inspection on your workplace as an individual, then you see a naked cable. Now you would want to assess what can go wrong with that naked cable. Now that is risk assessment. And how can it affect you? So if there is a live wire around you, if there is a live wire around you, you then need to assess what are the risks of that live wire and how can it affect me. So we all know with live wires, if you come in contact with it, the risk is always electrocution. Then you always need to assess what are the chances of me getting exposed to that hazard, to that live wire. Obviously, the chances with the live wire, they are very high. Then you need to assess the consequences, which is electrocution that I've highlighted. That is it for risk assessment. So all the hazard identification and risk assessment is not done just to know the hazard within your process or your workplace. It is done to then manage and control the hazard and the risks that you identify. So risk control is a very important element in the HIRA procedure that you need to consider whenever you're doing your hazard identification and risk assessment. So risk control, what is risk control? Risk control, we are now talking about eliminating or the inactivation of a hazard in a manner that it does not pose any risks. So you have identified your hazard maybe with a non-routine task or within your working area after an inspection, and you have assessed the risk associated. You know that with this live wire there's electrocution, but now you need to control that hazard, maybe by eliminating it, that is getting rid of the live wire, or by inactivating it, maybe you switch off the power and or by reducing exposure to that hazard. Those are some of the risk controls that are there. So we have what we call a hierarchy of control as a way of managing risks. Like I've highlighted before, that risk assessment is mainly done to prioritize the hazard for control and identify the interim for the control measures. So the first effective control measure that you need to take for any risk that you have identified is elimination. With elimination, we are saying that you are totally getting rid of the hazard itself. Then after elimination, elimination is followed by substitution. If you cannot eliminate the hazard, you have an option of substituting it with a much less hazardous equipment or process. Then if you cannot substitute the hazard, we then move on to engineering controls. Now with engineering controls, you would have said we cannot inactivate the hazard or we cannot substitute, but now we can now reduce exposure. That's when you implement engineering controls. For instance, with when someone is working at heights, you would find out that there's no way we can eliminate the hazard of height. So what are the engineering controls that you would implement? You then put on guardrails as a way of protecting the worker from being exposed to the hazard of falling or the risk of falling. Then if engineering controls cannot be implemented, the next option is administrative measures. With administrative measures also, we are trying to reduce exposure to the hazard. We are saying we cannot get rid of the hazard totally, but we have an option of reducing exposure to the hazard. For instance, if you're working near a furnace, there is a hazard of heat, but that hazard cannot be eliminated because the furnace is always associated with high temperatures. So the administrative controls, that measures or that are implemented in that case is a measure of shifts where employees take turns on working on such a work environment. Then the least effective control measure that we have for hazards and risks is the use of PPE. PPE, as I've highlighted, is the last resort of protection, and PPE is mainly about defending the exposure as well as the hazard. But this is not, whenever you're doing a hazard identification and risk assessment, don't take PPE as the first priority or measure to control that hazard. You have to assess if there are any options of eliminating it. You have to assess if there are any options of substituting the hazard. You have to assess if there are any options for implementing engineering controls or any administrative measures that can be put in place. Then you jump on to the use of PPE. So, ladies and gentlemen, hazard identification and risk assessment is a very important and a critical element for an effective safety and health program, like I've highlighted before. So we need to take note of it whenever we are in our workplaces, so that we will keep ourselves safe from any hazard that are associated with our tasks. I think with that, I would like to thank you for your time that you've given us. Yeah, I can see, Mr. Ranga, your hand is up. Do you have something to? You can come. Yes.
Thank you very much, Teach, for the presentation. I'd like to comment on what you said about accident investigations. Myself, I am not an ESH practitioner, but I'm a survivor from an electrical accident. And it is funny to realize that the same type of accident kills people, maims people, destroys equipment. And it is something that is actually important that you have raised, that we should investigate accidents with a view to avoid the same in future. And just to comment on the issue about electrocution, we talked about hazards that come from using electrical equipment, yes, it is important to remove the person from the source or to remove the source, disconnect the supply. But it is also important for the person who is going to conduct first aid, who has reacted to the accident or to the mishap, to make sure that they are also safe. Thank you for the presentation. That was my contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Ranga, for that. Thank you for that point. In my experience, also, I've noted that people don't take hazard identification and risk assessment as a serious component for managing health and safety. For instance, with non-routine tasks, people will just come into the SHE department, collect the pre-task assessment forms. Then maybe 2 people that will be involved with that task will complete the document, sign in, then put it aside. Then other people that would have been part of that HIRA would then jump in and proceed with the task, but they wouldn't have known all the hazard because they were not part of the hazard identification and risk assessment. And in some instances, that's when accident occur, because most of those people that will join in later, in their back of their minds, they are programmed to just complete the task, but they will not include the precautions to be taken when partaking that task. So hazard identification is very important, ladies and gentlemen. We have to implement it, use it each and every time. Like I've highlighted, it's an ongoing process that should be implemented in our workplaces. Is there anyone with a contribution or a point or an add-on on this subject?
Yes, I want to add one thing. My colleague is saying.
Okay.
The 2 guys, they went for the hazard risk assessment because there is a lack of something. They did not went for the induction program. I think this is the mandatory before doing any worksite job. They should go first for the EHEC department, take the induction, necessary inductions, and then they will proceed for the work.
Yeah, thank you. True. Induction is a very important element for hazard identification risk assessment. For instance, if you are taking in new employees or contractors, you have to induct them on all the hazards that are in your processes or operations, so that whenever they are joining in or they are moving around in the plant, they will be aware of what to look out for in the workplace. Thank you for that contribution, sir. Is there anyone with another addition, subtraction, or an add-on? Okay, so I think that concludes our toolbox talk today. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for the discussion. Now I'll give this opportunity to Mr. Mupunga so that he can introduce our guests for the topic today. Mr. Mupunga, are you with us?
Yes, Teach, I am here. Thank you and well done for a wonderful presentation. And our guest today is Mr. Derek Martins, all the way from down under Australia, South Australia. So welcome, Derek.
Thanks, Fungo. It's good to join you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for making time to be with us. Look forward to learning, getting some knowledge and your experiences that you've had over many years working in the field. So thank you for making the time, and I'll hand over to you to take us through, perhaps starting off with introducing yourself and how you ended up in this field. Thank you, Derek. Over to you.
Thanks. All right. I'll kick off with brief introduction. So I was born and bred in Mpumalanga, South Africa, in a small town called Sabi. I did my mechanical engineering degree from the University of Stellenbosch, but I've always worked in maintenance. I've never really been an engineer in the true sense. I've always enjoyed the maintenance field a lot more, and I spent a lot of time in that So I've worked in both in South Africa and in Australia. And these days I'm a maintenance reliability specialist. So I've worked in both ops and maintenance, as from supervisor up to manager, and enjoyed all the roles and what all of that brought in terms of experience. So I've worked in the stainless steel industry, ferrochrome industry, platinum, iron ore, uranium, copper, waste industry, construction, demolition, and lately in timber and zinc as well. So a fairly broad range of experience, and the shutdowns have always been a deeply rooted passion. That's where I met you. We started doing shutdowns, and as you know, it's always been my passion is to see executing a shut and see people all go home safely and not burnt and not tired. So, and that's where all of this began.
No, thank you, Derek. Yes, thank you, Derek. I think we've got many stories that we can share about when we met. Yeah, some not so good at the time, but I guess we have the privilege of laughing about it now.
Yes.
Excellent, thanks.
All right. So as Funga mentioned, so where it all started, I was involved in what they called it a planned shutdown. It's a 500-man shutdown. It was supposed to last 7 days. It lasted 13.5 days. We completely ran over budget, and under my control was about 30% of the labor on that shut. And in that 13.5 days, my team had more injuries and incidents than I had in my whole working career prior to that. And I felt the distinct, absolute reason that somebody is going to get killed here, because it was just out of control. And that sort of kicked it all off. I volunteered to take over the shutdown in that space, and I started with analyzing every single incident that happened. I sort of wanted to say that to teach this presentation took a lot of my my information that I'm going to share with you today, because this is what I did. Is I just went and said, of every incident, I'm going to find what is the corporate or the system failure that caused this incident, because sometimes people tend to blame it on an individual, but there's always a corporate failure in that, where you as a company, as a plant owner, as the supervisor, where you can make a fundamental difference in how in preventing that incident. So I spent a few months just going through every single incident and grouping all of these contributing factors. The next thing we did is we simplified. Sorry, I'll jump back to the previous one. Is there any questions from anybody? Okay, I'll take it as a no. All right. Then we said, okay, we're going to start simplifying. So you simplify your inductions, your escalation process and org structure. You need to have plain messages, pictures rather than words. Shoot videos if you can. These days, everybody has got a camera in their pocket. So instead of putting people through a long induction with lots of writing, rather shoot a video that says, this is how you do it. We found one of the biggest things we found was there was people didn't understand the difference between fall prevention and fall arrest. And we just did a 2-minute video with somebody explaining and showing what's the difference between fall arrest and fall prevention. And that made it clear for everybody. So then it's not ambiguous. It's not that people don't know. Just makes it a lot simpler. next thing is around communication, and communication is very key. We talk about our ability to, like inductions. It's how do you present that induction? Is it somebody that stands in front and talk to a slideshow and everybody's dozing off, or do you make it fun so people understand what you're saying? And you need to keep very open and honest communication during the shutdown. I've found that a lot of the times miscommunication is one of the big issues, where you tend to where a lot of unnecessary pressure comes from. People talk about, so in a shut there's always pressure because everybody's in a hurry, and it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're well planned, well structured, do not hurry, but also give that message to the people. You cannot in one hand say to people work safe, and then in the other hand tell them but you need to hurry up with the job, because haste causes accidents. And it's always important to remember that, especially if you're a leader in a shutdown. It's how you portray the message, that communication, that makes the biggest difference. So be honest on what your progress is. Tell people if you're behind schedule, but do it in a way that says, yes, we are behind, but we have something in place to make sure that we can either catch up, or it's okay that we're behind. It's not, because the message that you portray causes what you say. You might say we're behind schedule, and that's all you say. What people hear is, oh, we need to hurry up. So be very honest in your progress in your shut, and open and honest in your communication. The other one is to really encourage reporting, and the more you can get people to report, the better it becomes for your shutdown, and the more you can learn. Now, be cautious, very cautious what you do with that information. When people start encouraged, they'll start reporting incidents or reporting injuries. Do not alienate them in that, because the minute you alienate people, they'll stop reporting. And probably the last one, which was a learning for me, the site that I worked at had a very reputation of, if you do something wrong, they put people off site, because that way they get rid of the problem. And the problem with that is it really creates fear and distrust among your workers, and it's you need to be very, I would really say, do not do it as far as possible. If you can, don't do it, because a real life example is, I had two scaffolders who was, one was a supervisor and the other one was an estimator, and they breached the working at height rule. And the immediate reaction, everybody wanted to put him off site, and I said, hang on. So I pulled him into my office and said, you've got one of two choices. You can either stand up in front of everybody at the next pre-start meeting and tell them what you've done is wrong, because you've risked your life unnecessarily, because you could have taken the time to put on a harness before you did it, and it's not worth risking your life and your livelihood by not doing it, just to gain, I don't know, 5 minutes on the job. It's not worth it. Or you can leave site yourself. So that's the choice I gave them. They obviously chose to stand up in front of the pre-start, and in that moment, the feedback I got after that from the whole crew that was there, everybody said that had a more profound impact on people making safer choices than actually if he was put offside. And that's the way, when something happens, you can use it in the communication. And again, it's positive communication. So you're honest with people, you tell them what's happening, and explain to them. All right. Sorry, I'll go back one. Yes.
Yes, Derek. So, no, thank you for that. I guess, with what you've shared, those first 3 slides or sections that you took us through are first steps and simplifying and the communication. That really sets the tone of the shutdown. And obviously, you would have done a previous shutdown and you're going into the next shutdown. I take it with the first steps, you analyze failures from the previous shutdown and the general operations. What has been your experience in regards, if you did all of that, whether you can do it 100% right, but on the long-term impact of the remaining of the shutdown, what has been your experience with that?
I think that if you start doing these things, you change the culture, and ultimately that's what you're trying to do. Is you want to make people start making safe decisions by themselves, and the longer you do this and continuously incrementally improve it, the more you change the culture, and people actually get on the journey with you, and they start believing that they can execute a safe shut, because ultimately that's what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to make everybody believe that this is possible, and when you do that and you get the critical mass to actually believe it's possible, they start looking after each other as well, and then they start calling out people who make unsafe decisions.
Okay. No, thanks for that. But you do know that there's the usual pressures leading into the shutdown, the preparation. I recall, we used to start preparing basically soon after the finish of the previous shutdown. But somehow, it always becomes a race to the start. And that race never seems to stop, because now you're rushing to keep up with the schedule. And I'll just bring up a point that's been brought up on the chat by Mr. Chibindi. How critical is the issues of deciding the deadlines of shutdown, considering your example of 7 days for the process that took 13.5 days? Who has the final say on the deadlines that are initially given? Your thoughts, please.
Ooh, that's a interesting question. Unfortunately, so I would have loved if it was always the whoever's in charge of maintenance manager, maintenance superintendent, if it was his decision. Unfortunately, we all live in a real world where money makes the world go round, and unfortunately, if your plant is down, you're not making money. So in reality, that's probably the thing that will drive it. So it will be a business decision that says, well, you've got 7 days. I suppose, and again, it goes to open and honest communication. If you can show that, look, this is the work we need to do, this is the planning for it, and this is why it's going to take 10 days. So on that specific example, the 7-day shut that lasted 13.5 days, part of the issue was we were relining a mill with the electrical motor kept on getting moisture in it, and then you can't turn the motor. It's a Svedala wraparound motor on the mill, and that was just the nature of it. So there was an engineering problem which caused the delay and which caused pressure on everybody. So unfortunately, those things happen. But it's how you react in that moment. Do you start, as a leader, do you start jumping up and down and put pressure on people, or do you step back, calm and collected, and say, okay, this is what it is. How do we now manage this? If that helps.
Okay. And I guess the message is being delivered to many stakeholders. You've got your regular staff that you work with every other time. contractors that have come to do work, and then obviously you've got the management team that's got then the business is making money, and it must be a balancing act. How did you pull that off?
So as much as I love shutdowns, I'm a firm believer that the best shutdown ever is the one you never do. And I think that's as a executioner, people, we as pure maintenance people, we tend to try and do the whole fix everything. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned is what you should do is you should get as much work out of your shut as possible, and only do the critical things that you have to do in the shut, because that way you reduce your risk, you reduce your cost, and you reduce your likelihood of a problem.
Very true. I guess that also comes into play with your regular maintenance whilst operating, but that's a conversation for another day. Now, on the simplify aspect, how do you simplify the message? I mean, you get people of different backgrounds coming to do the shutdown, and the fact that they're there means everyone is important. But how do you simplify the message? To what level do you take it to?
I suppose so. Having grown up in South Africa, and I was telling somebody here a week ago, just in the workshop that I was in, there was 6 different mother tongue spoken, and that's why I learned to always talk with pictures. And I think that's probably the best way to make it is when you start explaining safety rules in pictures, everybody understands it. Then there's no language barrier. It's not that people don't understand. I mean, in Australia, people still call me out on my bad accent, English accent. So it's and I've found to talk in pictures, that's the best way people understand.
And I guess that comes in the adult learning. You know, you're not reading to be an expert or to qualify. So no, thanks for that, Derek. I'll let you continue on. Before we go, any comments, contributions, questions, thoughts from the audience?
Yes, please, yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes, as stated by Mr. Derrick, they are asking about the 2 guys, they went on the scaffold without wearing harness, and they are risking their life. So I believe sometimes the line managers, they are on the work site especially, they are in a hurry, and they are going to allow them to proceed. So there is a lack of management, I believe. And one thing, one comment more added by Mr. Derrick, they are asking during the shutdown incident, the managers are fearing and they are not reporting. So I believe the fear is the enemy of safety excellency. So this is just I want to add. Thank you.
Yeah, and so part of that fear also brings uncertainty, and people. I mean, when you're scared, you make. So if you go and do some research, so when you're stressed, or when you're highly strung, or when you're tired, or when you're stressed, or when you're scared, you actually half your IQ. And that's why people make bad decisions. They make bad judgment calls. And that's why if you can keep people calm and under control, and so under control, I mean within their own minds, they remain within control of their own emotions, then they actually make wiser decisions.
Yes, agreed.
Excellent. Thank you for that contribution. Any other comments? Everyone is welcome.
Yes. Can you hear me? I would like to say thanks, Derek.
Yep, can hear you.
Yes, I was saying thanks for the insights. I think you have touched some of the critical issues, like incident reporting. It's very critical that incidents are reported, And safety has to be a culture for everyone, being it employees or contractors. So once it becomes a culture, it will be easy now for reporting to be done. Then on shutdown targets or deadlines, I think the best critical issue is to make an evaluation, a true reflection, like what Derek has said, of the progress. Then if there are some challenges that have to be highlighted, and it's a strategic decision that can be done by each and every member team to even postpone the shutdown or to extend it. Because what's key is to cover the key areas than rush to operate or do operations. Because otherwise, if we rush to do some works, it can create another problem or make another incident. So that's my contribution. But thank you so much for this great topic.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thanks for the feedback. All right.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mr. Marara. Any other before we let Derek continue? Okay, over to you, Derek. You can proceed.
Thank you. Right. So the next bit is around work planning. What we found was that when you're on site as a planner or whoever does your planning of your work, they tend to plan the work for the guy that's sit next to him or the tradesman that's there every day, and that's the wrong mindset to have. You need to plan for the person that's never been to your site. All right. So imagine it's the first day you walking into site, as most of us have been. If you walk in and somebody says to you, "Oh, go to the admin building," it's like, where's that? All right. So, and you need to keep that person in mind that's never been there and plan for them. So use a photo, use a map, use layout drawings, equipment labels. Make sure that you put in detail into your planning. Now, we established a process where each person would take his work pack, and we'll give him a sticker with the work order number printed on, and he would actually walk into the field and he would go and stick his sticker on the piece of equipment he's going to work on. And that then gets verified by some of the on-site teams just to make sure, yep, they've got the right piece of equipment. Again, that came out of an incident where somebody went and cracked a pipe joint and got sprayed with slurry because the pipe was under pressure because they worked on the wrong pipeline, and they were on the right pipeline on the wrong train of the float section. Now, so it's the systemic failure or the corporate failure in that was that you assume people know where train A and train B is, and if you assume that, that's where the risk comes in, and that's why you'd really basically plan for somebody who's never been there. Put a layout drawing on there, mark the piece of equipment, take a photo so that the person, when he walks up, he knows exactly where it is. The next thing is around your spares, and that's something that I'm passionate about. If you have the capacity, is to really make sure that all your spares are together. Now, there's two aspects to that. One is obviously the safety aspect, is that people don't get frustrated because they have to walk around looking for spares. So you prep it up, put it in a container, put it at the job site, or on a pallet, put it at the job site so that the person knows, yep, here's my spares, this is my pump, I can replace it. The frustration is there because frustration again creates stress, and stress makes people make bad decisions. So you need to the aim is always to make it as simple and easy for everybody on there to understand their work, to execute their work. The next one is the safety pause. Now, I found that usually when there's a incident, major incident, there's always a stop for safety. Pull everybody in, then talk to everybody because there's this incident and we all have to stop and listen and now work safe. We turned that around and said, well, let's have a safety pause. So halfway through the shut, we plan it in, it's scheduled in, we actually stop, get all the work crews in and have a discussion with them about why it's important to work safely. Not because of an incident, because safety is important. Then there's no better way to show people that you're serious about safety if you are willing to stop a shutdown and pull everybody in and just talk about safety. Now, if you do it in a planned fashion, you tell people at the beginning of the shut already you're going to have a safety pause in the middle of the shut. Initially, most of the people don't believe you, but once you start doing it, then people realize, yep, you are serious about safety. And then the last bit, the plan for the unexpected. Now, this is where you need to make sure that you've got the resources, but you've also got the decision maker. That's the typical cool, calm, collected person that if the unexpected happen, you can pull him into a room and say, okay, so how do we handle this? And he's the guy that will be not stressed, not worried, and say, yep, no, let's do it this way. And it's important to identify those people before you're shut and say, look, when things go wrong, I'm expecting you to make the decision so that they understand that's their role, but then also that they can prepare for it. And planning for the unexpected is, I'm talking about plan for the weather, plan for rain, plan for anything that could go wrong. And again, it goes to what Titch started at the beginning, is ask the question, what can go wrong in the shutdown? What's the things that can trip us up? You know, if your whole shut is planned and you've got an overhead crane, what if the overhead crane fails? You know, is that the critical going to influence the critical path? If so, what is my contingency? What do I put in place for in case this happens? Because any uncertainty creates challenges, creates risk, and ultimately causes incidents. All right, then.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll pause there before we go there.
All right.
Are there any questions?
All right, I'll ask first. So I guess, yeah, you know, as you mentioned, just talking about planning the work for contractors or persons that are not regularly on site, and you went through the process of how you ensure they got up to speed. But what are some of the, I guess, tricks or systems that you can put in place to make sure that on arrival, yes, they go through the inductions and the like, but as you can imagine, some of the shutdowns, for example, the one you mentioned, they had 500 people. How do you get everyone started in an orderly fashion? Naturally, we all want to get the job done and carry on. So imagine a mine site or any large operation, everyone is just going to rush in and they want to get going.
Again, that goes, I believe that goes back to leadership. So the day before the shut started, we had everybody usually on site because it was a FIFO site. And we pulled everybody into a room, into a massive big crib room. And we spoke to them and said, look, this is welcome. This is the shut. No need to rush. This is important to us that you work safely, you go home safely, and create the expectation for people to understand what it is that you're serious about. Now, it's again, how you approach it determines the attitude in the shut. It's important to be calm as the leader, and if you can't be calm, then find a leader that can be calm when they talk to people. It is important that how you present your pre-starts at the beginning of every shift, which I probably should mention as well. It's the every pre-start determines the attitude for the shift. Now, if you have a pre-start where somebody's screaming, saying, "Oh, we need to get this done," you're going to have people rushing. If you have a pre-start where you talk to people and say, it goes back to the communication to say, "Look, we're on track," or "The shut is just starting, there's still equipment running, so be careful," and just be honest with people and be measured and collected in your approach. That sets the tone. People will feel it, and people will believe it if you're honest. So, and I think that's probably the key thing, is that initial contact, how you contact people, and just brief them with, this is the shutdown expectations. This is what we typically do. So we would also get our supervisors, all the supervisors, in a week in advance, and just talk to them and explain to them what's the expectation, what's the work, so that they have time to prepare. So give them time to go through all their tasks that they're supposed to do. Give them time to prepare mentally before their crews arrive and do the work. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Derrick. Why we not use the Lotus strategy during the shutdown, lockout, tagout? Is there any reason behind this?
Do you talk about local people? Sorry?
No, Loto, lockout, tagout.
Oh, yes.
Lockout, tagout.
Yes, sorry. I'm with you. Yes, you will use it. And again, it depends on site to site. I've just come off a shut where they actually don't use lockout tagout. They use a cable tie, which I'm not very comfortable with. But and the lockout tagout should be part of your planning. That's your isolation process, should be part of your planning and should be part of your pre-work on your shutdown. The risk is if you use local isolators, so field isolators, you're expecting somebody to know where that field isolator is located. If he needs to apply his own personal lock, if you don't use a group lock process with lockout tagout boards, if you work with local isolators, you expect somebody to put a lock onto a local isolator, you're expecting him to know where that is. And again, map and a photo makes things a lot more easier, clearer for people to know.
Yes, thank you. It's enough. Thank you.
No problem.
And presumably, the more details you have in the scope of work or for each work order, the easier it is for those coming onto site to do a particular job.
Yep. And the more information you give them, even if they don't use all the information, a simple example is you tell them what oil they need to put in the gearbox and how much oil needs to go into the gearbox. You write it down, then they don't have to call somebody and find out or put in the wrong oil, which causes other issues. And again, so it makes it easier for people to execute their work without having to ask somebody else and add more to a workload up the food chain. So.
Excellent. Any more contributions, thoughts?
Hi, I would like to add one more thing. Actually, in Derrick's first point, like the task should be planned for the person who has never been to site. That is very relevant to me because I'm thinking we need to combine this plan for unexpected with this first point, because in my experience, we have different people from different background during a shutdown. And apart from the normal crew, during the shutdown, there will be many additional people. Like they've never been to that particular site. They may have different experience, different backgrounds, but they may not been to that particular site. So the risk, the hazards arising during the situation, during the shutdowns, like maybe from some adjacent facilities, there is some gas leak or something like, or it may be related to some materials, like Derrick told, maybe some crane failure or something. So the new people being to site, they are not at all aware about the surroundings. They are not at all aware about the where to go, how to respond. So what my point is, the bottom level supervisory positions, the site safety officers, they should ensure that these new people will be on special focus to like during any sort of such emergencies, such critical things. These people should be mostly taken care of because they are not aware of the situation.
100% agree.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you plan for the people that's never been there, then everybody else is catered for, and that's what you're trying to achieve. You want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with where you're at.
Yep, no, very true. Very true indeed. Any other comments or contributions from the audience before we let Derrick continue? Okay, over to you, Derrick.
Okay. Right. So then on to execution strategies. So, and this is something that this was developed as we went along, and we found it to be really effective. And it's about, you don't aim for a safe shut, right? So when you communicate to people, it's not about having a safe shut. It's about having a safe day or a safe shift. And the reason for that is because if you aim for a safe shut and it's a 10-day shut, and on day 2 you have an accident, then it's no longer a safe shut. So what do people then do? They then no longer focus on safety because, well, we haven't achieved a safe shut, so it doesn't matter anymore. And when you only talk about the safe shift, so having a safe shift, the shift safely, you end up, it becomes achievable. People start believing, well, we can have a safe shift. And even if there's an incident in this shift, the new shift that starts, it's a new day, new shift. And therefore we can achieve this safe shift. And only focus on the safe shift. So, and things we did, so we always had the groups to talk about what's the highest risk tasks for that shift, and then identify what is the highest risk task overall on the shutdown, only for that shift, and then talk about it. Because when you discuss it, we discuss it at shift start, and we let the work groups talk about their highest risk for the day. The supervisor say, look, we're doing this heavy lift today. These are the risks that we see. You start getting experience from other people and other groups that start saying, well, you know what? We've had a similar thing that happened and this incident occurred. Therefore, make sure you've got these controls in place. And then you have a shared learning during that shift start. And when you get to that point where people start sharing experiences, and that again goes to, then people become comfortable. They start feeling appreciated because you're now respecting their opinions and asking their opinions, and it changes how people behave, and people become more open. All right. So that's the.
So just on that one, I guess it's one of those not biting too much, and not everyone needs to look ahead. This is where I guess management or leadership comes in. Let's let the workers on shift or the doers of the job worry about what's immediately ahead of them. Just to add on, any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly it. Because people, we all want to have some control, and you want to know you are adding, you're adding value in what you do. And if you talk to somebody and say, well, we need to have a safe shutdown, most people will go, wow, how do I as a worker contribute to this big shutdown being safe? And that's where you change it and say, well, I just want you to focus on having a safe shift. You personally, you and your team focus on the safe shift, because then it becomes, yes, that's in my control, and therefore I can control it, and people take ownership.
Yeah, powerful word, taking ownership. Any
Yes.
thoughts, contributions from the audience? Back to you, Derek.
Thank you. All right. So
sorry, I
on a
think
small-
we had a hand up. Sorry, Derek. I think we had Ranga. Ranga, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to allude to the aim on this, on a safe shift. It helps clear everyone's mind and make sure that we are working together to achieve the same goal. Sometimes breaking down the goals to smaller goals, everyday goals, it actually helps us to achieve our safety goal. And the last point on the slide that talks about discussing, it helps for people to actively contribute, not just for safety to be talked about by the competent person in charge of work, but even the last worker, the shop floor worker, needs to understand what the strategy, how are we going to take on this day so that we maintain maximum safety. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Over to you, Derek.
So on a smaller scale, so we did exactly that a bit more over a week ago. It was I'm saying it's a smaller shut, although it was a fairly complex shut where we had dual crane lifts and there was quite a few complex lifts involved. And again, it's about focus on understanding your work. We made sure that we planned the work properly. Everybody involved understood what was the expectation, what was the work they had to do. And every shift we started with what is the highest risk for that day. We discussed it with the group involved, and we were able to do that just by making sure everybody has a clear understanding. What is it they want to do? What is it we're trying to achieve as a team? And what is our risks for that day? And it was just the risk for the shift. What are you doing? What's important? And the last bit, and that's probably the more difficult one, is to not rush and do not push. Do not start making suggestions about we need to get this done by the end of the shift. The minute you say those words as a leadership, as when you're in part of leadership and you say we need to get it done by end of shift, people hear rush, and rush causes incidents. All right, that's me for this one.
All right, so taking your time, but the production will be banging on your door. Are you on schedule? When are we starting up?
And I think that's why it is important that you always take your production partners on this journey with you, because when a serious incident occurs, everything stops, right? Usually there's an inspector involved or a coroner, and that's what you want to prevent. So therefore, if you take your production partners with you on the journey to say, let's do this together, and everybody owns his part in that shut. So if it's well planned, your production guys actually own a piece of the work. It becomes our journey and not just maintenance's journey, which is probably the one of the bigger challenges to overcome. But it's not impossible.
True. Well, we are not that bad production people. Excellent. So I like the point of focus every shift on your highest risk task for the day. And I think that also tends to make people think about their job as well. After discussing the high risk task, it kind of conscientizes their mind so that when they go to their own job, they also think of identifying what's taking place. But yeah, thanks for that. Any comments from the audience? I'll just check the chat as well. Okay, I'll let you go ahead, Derek.
All right. I'm basically done. This is something I discussed with you. I'm going to share with the audience. So in my dealings with shutdowns over the last 20 odd years, the one thing that we always tried is you always try and plan for the unexpected, and you plan and schedule and make sure that you eliminate some ops where people work together in close spaces, or we don't want a crane lift over somebody working, and it's usually done on a paper-based system. So we would step through 12-hour windows and identify all the tasks, map it out on a map, and say, yep, these work won't interfere. And then you do the next shift, and you step it through and make sure there's no problem. The limitation of that system is that usually at the start of shift, my production brother sometimes forget to clean out a tank, and then that portion of the shift is now, of the shut is now late, so because they are rushing to get it done so that we can start the work. The problem with that is that all of your pre-planning to eliminate sim ops have just went out of the window, because now your portion of your shut everywhere have shifted, and it creates its own risk. Now, this is something that I've been working on probably the last 7 years, that I've been thinking and trying and seeing how we can build it, and we've developed it into an electronic system now. We're currently busy with beta testing on it, and the aim is to eliminate simultaneous operations, sim ops, and also to look at where do you have interference of work. Now, it's a web-based program, so you can then, what you can do is you can just upload your MS Project or Excel schedule, depending on which one you use, and it will give you a heat map on that shift. So it will take into account what work has already been done, what work is still in progress over the next 12 hours, and it will give you a heat map or a map with all your highest risk work identified, and you can actually see where you now have work that is going to interfere with each other, so that at the start of shift you can already rearrange if you need to make sure that you eliminate these higher risks. And obviously it can also, you can use it before the shut, and it helps you with your planning and your scheduling, so you can see where work might interfere and reschedule. And so we basically rolling it out in Southern Africa as well as Australia. And I've got local support partners in South Africa that will be supporting this on that side. Yeah, so if you're interested in this, just connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message on LinkedIn, and as soon as we've done beta testing, I can showcase it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, simultaneous operations is where most of the high risk activities tend to take place and usually lead to incidents. And from your experience, from the shutdowns, where do most of the incidents occur? Is it on the CMOPs? Is it in the middle of the shut, towards the end? Where should our energies go? Because it's easy on paper before the shut in the planning stage to identify and say that's where these are the CMOPs or the high risk activities. But of course, once we get into execution, it doesn't always go 100% to plan. Things are going to shift. So how do we navigate through that?
So I'll start off with your first question. So in my experience, SIMOPS is where most of the incidents occur, because you've got 2 work groups or 3 work groups in a very close proximity, and they interact with each other and have not considered each other when they did their risk assessment. They looked around, yep, this is all the risks, and walked off, did their risk assessment. Even if the whole group is involved, now there's another work crew which wasn't part of their risk assessment now introducing other risks, tools that drop or overhead crane or something. So that's usually where a lot of your incidents occur. With regards to when on the shut, I've found that beginning of the shut is usually, depends on how you set it up. If you set it up cool and calm, the start is usually good. Most of your incidents occur towards the end, and it's because people start rushing, because pressure comes on, and it's all these things that make people in their mind rush and make bad decisions. It's also because that's when fatigue sets in. After 7 or 8 days, your body needs a break, and that's when you start getting fatigued, making bad decisions. It all builds up to the end, and that's the bit that I've seen in my working career, and it's how you cater for those things. Again, it's planning is one, and then the other is to make sure that you discuss these high risks and you control them as they go. And I'll go back to the shut that we've just done. We had one critical path, and during the shut, 3 jobs on different stages were on the critical path because things didn't go quite as planned. So the first job got delayed, and then that became the critical path. Then there was another one once we got control over that. And part of managing that is you need to be able to shift your leadership to say, all right, let's how do we manage this risk and do it in a controlled fashion, do it in a calm and controlled fashion. And I use the word calm often because I think that's very important to make sure that your leadership stays calm. Do not go into panic mode, because when you panic, everybody panics.
Yes, I was going to ask you, you emphasize on calm so many times. So I guess you mentioned the critical path.
Yep.
Now, of course, we've planned our shutdown. We've gone into the start of the shutdown. We've had delays, whether it be at the stage of handover or clean out by production, or the isolations aspect and the start of maintenance work. Things have shifted around, and now we've got numerous CMOPs taking place. Now you would have planned resources, the safety team that's going around doing audits, but eventually those resources become stretched, I guess is the word.
Yep.
Where do you start shifting and that whole coordination aspect?
It's a bit of a that's probably I would say that's a multi-dimensional question, a multi-dimensional answer. Now, if you are stretched on your resources, my first reaction as a maintenance engineer kicks in and I say, well, get rid of all your unnecessary work, unimportant, unnecessary. If you can, remove work out of your shutdown to relieve pressure. That's not always possible, which is fair enough. Then it's also important to stop and reassess, and that is super critical to be able to say, hang on, guys, let's stop this. Let's go and revisit and redo, because I think it is. I can't accentuate it enough to say that as a leadership, you need to be able to say, let's stop, let's reassess, and ask the question, what can go wrong? Because that's where, when the pressure comes on and people get stretched, that's where leadership comes into play, because then that's when things go wrong. And if there's any incident that adds to the pressure, that adds to people being stretched, because now you have to do an incident investigation, you have to do this, and you have to care for people, and it just stretches you more. So I always say it's easier to just stop, rethink while everybody still are still safe, than rush and overstretch people and then somebody get injured, because that just adds more and more and more pressure and stress.
Yeah, very true. And I guess this is where the engagement and communication, particularly at management level, becomes very important. I'm sure once upon a time, the response would have been, every job is important. That's why it's on the shutdown list.
Yes, that's very true.
We didn't just put it there because we like doing stuff. So it must happen. But I guess, that's coming together as a leadership team and reviewing that becomes very important. Any thoughts or contributions from the audience? So any tips for, towards the end of the shutdown? As you say, people are fatigued, schedule, I've seen quite a few shutdowns, and really are we running ahead of schedule? Because usually we add more work if we see it doing too well, as we do. Now towards those last days, where do you shift your focus? Because I'm sure your introduction of the shutdown at the start as the head of shutdown or head of maintenance is going to be different in the middle and towards the end. It's like a match, it's like a game, whether it be rugby or soccer, there's a strategy for different stages. So when we get towards the end, what's your technique, or what have you worked out? What works out for you?
The focus to the end always goes to commissioning, to getting the plant back up and running, because commissioning introduces risk. And if you have people working, and yes, your isolation is supposed to protect you, but the isolations are done by people, and people make mistakes. So, and that's the bit that the focus for me always goes to, as soon as there's the first piece of equipment is going back online or back live, that's where the focus shifts. And that's where, again, it's about keeping people calm, not to rush that last end, because make sure that everything goes back as it should. So all the guarding goes back into place. You make sure that you tidy up the area where you've worked, just so that when you're done, everybody feels good, because it looks good and you can hand it over to production. It's not always possible. You end up, if you reline a mill and you've got 30 tons of liners lying around, you're not moving them quickly, but it's still make sure that it's out of the way, so that the operations guys can start getting back into their plant. But my focus is always goes to 100% goes to focusing on the commissioning, because I think that's always the risk.
And there's nothing worse than starting a plant and having to shut down everything to do some tidying up or tightening of bolts and the like. So you've just touched on another aspect that I wanted to get into, which is the post shutdown. Obviously the work's been completed. Bits and pieces are being handed back. Production is back in action, but the shutdown doesn't end there. What tends to happen? What transpires after?
So there's a couple of aspects. So one is obviously you need to clean up. If you use rotables, get your rotables back in your system so that it can be repaired for next time. But one of the things that for me, there's two aspects that I believe is very important. So one is you need to get feedback on your planning and on your schedule. So people need to give you feedback. That the actual doers of the work need to give you feedback and say, you planned this job for me, but you missed half of the spares, or you missed bolts and nuts, or you allowed too much time because we finished the job in 2 hours instead of 4. You need that feedback so next time you can use that again. Because what I found is that we're very good at executing the shut and then just thanks, that's gone. You should decide, and then start planning for the next one instead of taking your learnings from the shut and reapply it to the next one. So, which leads me to the next thing, which I'm a firm believer of, is that every shut should have a post-mortem, post-shut review, where you dissect what you've done, and you are serious and do it not in a blaming way. Do it in a way of, how do we make this better? Because I've been involved in a shutdown recently that they've done this specific shutdown, 80% of the work for 26 years, and every year they get it wrong. Every year they've overrun. Every year they hurt people. So, and you would think after 26 years you'll be pretty good at getting it right. And that's why that you need to capture your learnings from the shut and say, what did we do well? What do we keep on doing? What are the opportunities? Where can we learn where we've hurt people? What can we change so that we don't hurt people? What can we implement so that people know what to do, so that we lessen frustration, lessen people's stress level, so that we can make people enjoy a shutdown? I'm probably one of the very few, but I actually love shutdowns. I'm usually smiling when I'm on a shut, and people don't understand it, but it's a planned event. You know what you're going to do, you do what you do, and it's easy. Shutdowns are easy if you plan for it.
Very true. Yeah, if the plan is done well, I guess it's like any other event, whether it be a concert or a wedding, it all starts from the planning. And I like some major words you've used: calm, honest, and I think that post-mortem can be one of the very challenging things to happen, particularly with multiple stakeholders, various departments. You've got your shutdown team, depending on the structure of the organization. But if you have a shutdown team, and then you've got your regular maintenance team, then you have production, and then you have stakeholders, your safety and your environment and your planning team and the like. And look, I think just to add on to what you said, it's important to be honest and frank about what transpired. And I guess KPIs also come to it, things like your adherence to schedule and the like. Just facing the music without bringing in the blame game, because that's what tends to happen where we want to prove that, oh no, it's you who did this, and we start defending, and focus becomes on blame rather than anything else. But what sort of metrics or KPIs do you look at for shutdown performance?
So there's a few things. It depends on your site. So when we were talking about one of the sites that was a FIFO, I actually put a lot of emphasis on mobilization. So how we actually get people to site, how we house them, how we train them, so that which had nothing to do with the shut, but it had everything to do with the people's attitude on the shut, which made the shut safe. So there was a lot of emphasis on that bit to make sure that people, you remove the frustration, so that tonight when he goes to his camp room, there is a room for him to sleep in, there is a hot shower, there is food for him to eat. So that was a lot of my focus, and I think it depends on site to site. So one of the other sites that I worked on was just a normal drive-in, drive-out site. So there we put a lot of emphasis on how well the work was executed. So typically we'll measure how many rework is there post-shut. So you talk about when you start the plant up and the pipes are leaking. So typically we measure rework, make sure, the aim is to have 0 rework. We also looked at the reliability of the plant post-shutdown to make sure that, the work we do, we've done it to a high standard. And then the feedback we got from, so I always got measured my contractors on how many of the work packs they handed back with feedback.
Okay.
And if you want to, you can actually incentivize that and pay them extra, I don't know, hours worth of pay just to give you feedback on your plan, because it helps you in the long run as a business. It improves your planning, improves your business. I don't want to touch on something which you mentioned around the post shut. So what I found with especially when it's a big shut is you need to sort of disseminate the people you have in a room. So don't have the management team together with the contractors, because the contractors won't tell you honestly their experience with the management team in the room.
Yep.
It's sort of so you try and disseminate. So you take your frontline doers, you put them in a room and say, how is this for you? You take your contractors in a room, you ask them, how is this for you? And then you take your leadership team into a room and you ask them, how is this for you? And the questions you need to ask is, I never say what went wrong. I always ask, what's our opportunities to learn? How can we make this better? Because it's not about who's to blame. It's about how do we improve this process? How do we all collectively make it better so that we can succeed?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point that you bring up in terms of the wider management and the contractors. And one thing that tends to pop up all the time, people go do time in field, management goes to do time in field, and the other stakeholders who are not necessarily hands-on with the shut, but they go in with the right intentions of providing support. But how's that experience been for you?
I think, and again, so as an owner of a shutdown, you need to make that expectation very clear, right? So what is the expectation of the person that's, because what we found is you get people from admin coming to do a time in field, and they do a safe behavioral observation, SBO on you, and they know nothing about the work that's done, and they ask questions, and if they come with the wrong attitude, it causes frustration, and it causes people to not want to be open and speak about what's their concerns. I'll give you a real life example. We were doing a demolition project. We were about to drop 3 steel bins down on the ground, so it's a controlled fall. Fairly significant risk, as you can imagine, because you're dropping a 12-meter high structure on the ground, and a person came to do an observation, and as we were about to drop this bin, we had a drone in the sky that looked at, basically filmed the drop as it occurred. And the person said, "Oh, have you got a safe operating procedure for the drone?" It's like, no, we don't. But the guy's a licensed drone operator, so I don't think he needs a safe operating procedure. But we're about to drop a, 100-ton steel structure, but this is your concern. That's why I say you need to control that, those interactions. It's going to happen. If you're in a corporate world, it will happen, and it's just how you manage that and how you manage that message to them.
And I think it's important to set, it has to be coordinated. Even from our time together and what I've seen over the years, you almost need to set terms of reference on how it's to be done, who's going to do it. If you just put yourself in the shoes of the person doing the work, you're in the middle of doing a job, and someone comes to stop you. And there's a lot of factors that come in. Someone comes and starts taking an audit from a distance, looking at you, but hasn't introduced themselves or said what they're doing. And the example you just gave, you're about to drop the steel structure, and someone says, "Hey, hang on, what about this drone?" And you are at the peak of the risk of that task. So we have to have terms of reference. It's all for the right intentions. I think that's important always to highlight. That it's an important part of the shutdown and everyone is a stakeholder, and hey, everyone wants to be part of the party. No one wants to be left behind. But it certainly is a critical area that has to be looked into. Any questions or comments from the audience?
While somebody unmutes, I want to add one of the things we did, which I found was fairly successful, was we actually had all our supervisors and up. So everybody, if you're in a supervisor role or higher, we had them wear high-vis vests, which was marked saying supervisor or scheduler or superintendent or whatever your level was. And it caused two things. So one, it creates a level of responsibility for the person wearing the vest, because everybody sees he's the leader, and therefore everybody looks at him to make the right thing, do the right thing. But the other thing is, when you have a lot of people walking around and they supervisor level and they all wear these vests, and you can't really see whether he's a supervisor or the shutdown manager, people tend to do more the right thing, because it becomes visible that there's leadership in the field. So, and we found that to be effective. People come up to you and have a conversation and ask you, I'm looking for some assistance, where do I go to? And then at least, so all of your leadership is highlighted, that everybody knows if they've got a problem, they can ask anybody with a high-vis vest, because he's the guy that will know at least tell you who to go to help you.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, and it's about being available as well, I guess. Yes. Where someone has got an issue or wants to raise something or a suggestion, you can already see someone immediately available from the high-vis vest. So that's a really good idea to adopt. Anyone from the audience? Yes, Ranga, I see you've got, okay, it was a comment on 4Ps. Okay, now, of course, costs. Before we go towards the end, cost is obviously a big thing in a shutdown. And it's always a contentious issue that pops up. It's one thing setting a budget in the beginning of the year. What happens, and things tend to blow out. What's your approach on cost management?
I think there's, again, so it's how you, it depends on your business to business, right? So some businesses have fat budgets, some don't, and I think it's important to work within your realm that you operate in. And if you don't have a big budget, then do the simple things right. But in the same sense, I also say that, if you, I was working in a ferrochrome smelter in South Africa, and we, on our shutdowns, we always used to give the guys unlimited amounts of Coke, so they can have as much Coke as they want. And I had a GM that said, "Oh no, that's a bad idea." And I said, "Well, they wanted to stop it, but it only cost me about 2,000 Rand per shutdown. Now, considering I'm spending it was upwards of 200,000, no, it was more, it was about 500,000 on a shut. Then the 2,000 Rand is not that much money." But the guys that worked was all motivated and happy because, and they didn't drink all the Coke that I bought. So, but it was a very small token that made people motivated, and they stayed motivated. So, and sometimes it's those little things that you do that makes people's lives easier or help them. It doesn't have to cost you a fortune, but those are the small tokens that makes people enjoy the work more, and they go that extra mile and do a little bit more to make sure the shut is done safely. And on the cost, I always say the other side of it is you also need to ask the question about, how much does an incident cost you? And if you can prevent one incident by spending money, then it's a fairly simple mathematic to do, to say, well, if an incident occurs, you're shutting down for a day to do investigation, plus the cost of return to work, plus the injury, and reputational as a business, how much reputational damage does it do? And those are the things you need to ask and then say, okay, but if I spend X amount of money, I can save all of that. And usually, I'm not saying always, but usually when you present it like that to your management, they tend to go, yeah, okay, fair enough. They can see the point. Not always. I mean, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I guess it's always one of the key factors of shutdown. So excellent. Thank you for that, Derek. Now, I want to go back to something you touched on, your new system, your program that you've been working on for a while now, bringing in all that knowledge and experience into a usable platform for everyone, making a difference to the world, Derek.
I'm hoping.
So the idea is that we've captured our data from the shutdown, the different variables, what they say through Excel. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the aim will be, so you either use Excel or MS Project. So you basically have your list of work that you want to execute with the dates when you want to execute them. So typically build a project plan. But then also you have your, not GPS coordinates, but just XY coordinates, which you self-determine and say, look, this is my map. These jobs happen here, and you effectively plot them on a map. Okay. But then that then information goes into this online tool, and it gives you back for the next shift. This is where your work is occurring. So that's the way it will function. So initially, it will be a little bit more work for your planning department, because they'll have to identify what we call the XYZ coordinates. But once that's connected to your functional locations, which is your equipment structure, then you don't have to do it again.
Okay. All right. So it's like a leading action where this is what's ahead of you, rather than lagging, where it's a post review of what happened in the previous shift. So it all goes into your planning and accommodates what's already happened on previous days.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And then also, if you then have emergent work that comes up, which wasn't previously part of your shut, that also comes into play. Then that's also part of your review for the next shift, because now you've got unplanned work in that shift.
Oh yes, the additional work that pops up.
Yep. And then you can see how that interacts with your work that you've got planned for the shift.
Okay. Oh, no, I think that would be an interesting tool. And at what stage of how far are we from having a final product in market?
Well, like I said, we're busy with beta testing, so the aim is to have it ready for market in the next 1 to 2 months. Obviously, depending on how beta testing go, how much changes we need. But yeah, that's the aim.
Okay, no, excellent. No, we really look forward to seeing the product, and perhaps we'll have you another time to come and demonstrate for us how it all works, making shutdown safer for us. So I'll just go back to the audience. Any thoughts and comments thus far? I think we've touched on a wide range of areas of a shutdown. I see, Ranga, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Fungai. I would like to add on to what Derek said about the cost of spending money to save money. My story has a large part that talks about the cost of accidents. For those who missed the session, it was the first one. They can check our social media, our links for the presentation. but it is very expensive to try and recover from accidents. So kudos to Derek. 2,000 Rand isn't much to save 200 or 2 million Rand in trying to recover from accident. And the cost actually after accidents goes beyond the money. There's a lot of reintegration that is actually very difficult. Almost 9 years after my mishap with electricity, I'm still discovering myself. My body has changes. There's a lot of plus and minus situations after an accident. So that is important. I just thought I would share with the audience that the experience is not the best. You would rather spend a little bit of money to save a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Ranga. And I guess just to add on, as I recall, Ranga, your treatment cost in the order of 150,000 US over the 7 years. So from a direct cost perspective, financially, it's very significant compared to the 2,000 Rands for your Coca-Cola, and then add on the indirect costs that come with it.
Definitely.
Yep. So any other contributions, comments? Everyone is welcome. Yes, Mr. Coffee, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for such an discussion in terms of safety. Yeah, I'm sure we are all together in the same line that we normally try to discredit safety when we have some operational issues where we have no money. Safety becomes the last option in terms of sacrifices. Hence, when we come to issues to do with injuries, issues to do with like what we've been discussing, it becomes more expensive for the business. And I suggest and maybe think that whenever we do our cost, safety must be one of the key priorities, so that we won't get into unnecessary cost where the business can end up into. So I concur with your presentation that we should not save much in terms of safety than trying to make production more, yet we have some gaps in terms of safety and the health issues. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Coffee, for that contribution. So I like to use the term safe production. And in it, as you say, we bring in all the different aspects in the planning and costing, making sure we account for safety. Thank you for that. Mr. Tendai Kajgamadari.
Yes, thank you. I'm all right. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Thanks. I've been following the discussions, but I was losing it at some point because there was a time that I was on the road. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about this, to just summarize from my understanding on how to manage shutdowns from a systems perspective. So what I've noticed, even from my previous other shutdowns that we've done, if you just apply the principles of ISO 45000 and ISO 14000, even ISO 9000, you can actually run a very safe and cost-effective shutdown. There are a lot of issues that I had during the discussion, like identifying who the stakeholders are, what do they expect, what are their needs, and what are the risks associated with each of the stakeholders if you don't deliver the expectations. So I think if you approach it that way, everything that we discussed today is actually covered in those three standards. There's also something that is very important that probably I missed, but someone mentioned it. If there are changes during shutdown that we didn't expect, obviously we have to apply the MOC, management of change, so that we manage the risks that are associated with those changes. And I also had our guest speaker talking about CMOPs. There's also concurrent operations. So we need to manage that. One of the ways to manage that is a system called MOPO, or Matrix of Permitted Operations. So we need to know what can happen or what can take place either individually or side by side with each other, or what should not be allowed to take place when another activity is happening. For example, you cannot have guys removing a pump at a lower level when at the upper level we have guys who are working where there's a risk of dropped objects. So yeah, it was quite an insightful session, but I think yeah, there is more that we could do, and I think we could have more sessions like this where we actually focus on the specific issues. I also didn't hear us talking much about the environmental impact associated with the shutdowns. So I think these are also things that we need to take care, depending on the nature of the industry. Like for myself, I'm in oil and gas. When you do shutdowns, there's a lot of hazardous waste that is generated. So we should also be able to take care of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. Plan, do, check, act through the ISO systems or approach, and the other factors that you raised. I will certainly take note of those. And everyone here is welcome to be a guest on our webinars. We do them every 2 weeks, but I'll let Teach touch on that after we wrap up. Derek, any thoughts on the comments from the previous contributor?
So I think it's thanks for the feedback, and I suppose I'm as having done the execution for many years, I'm always cautioned to say, follow ISO this, ISO that, because unless you are really well versed in the ISO standards, it becomes very daunting. And I'll go back to where I started and say, it's about simplifying your process, simplifying what you do, so that it becomes easy for everybody. And that's all has always been my approach, and it's my general approach in most things I do. Is I'm trying to make it simple, because the complexity causes people to be confused, and confusion causes frustration, and frustration causes people to get injured. And that's why it's important to just always keep it simple. Yes, I agree. You can go and say, follow the ISO standard and implement it, but don't tell people we follow the ISO standard, because that then causes people to feel uncomfortable. So just be mindful in how you wrap that, or how you package that message.
Thank you for that. Derek, we got Jubin Sam. Please go ahead. Floor is yours.
Hi, Derek, and the organizers of this event. It was a really very insightful event. We actually are from different designations. People are here from different backgrounds, but through this session, we have recalled many minute aspects, in fact, and indeed, we all will implement, or maybe it's like a life-saving, like we may forget something, even a minute action, a wrong step will lead to disasters. So we all are again enlightened with this seminar. So thanks Derek for that one.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution, Jubin. As mentioned, we have these every 2 weeks, and at some stage, you're most welcome to come with a particular topic that you're passionate about. Any other comments or contributions from the audience? Okay, I guess we come to the end. Thank you so much, Derek. Really appreciate you coming onto the platform and sharing with us your knowledge and experience. There's always a lot to talk about, but before we let you go, any closing remarks, tips of what's ahead, anything you'd like to wrap up with?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It is good. I've been following these discussions, and I look. I mean, you know me. My passion has always been about making sure everybody goes home safe, and I think that's why I can go on talking about this for hours, because that's really the ultimate goal. Is you want to make sure everybody that's working with you goes home in the same state as what they've come to, and if you can have fun while doing it, it makes it even better. So if you can find ways to make shutdowns fun so people enjoy it, it will go a long way. That's the simplify your processes, keep it simple and make it fun for people to enjoy it, because you know, we spend hours and hours and hours at work, and if you do that in a place where you don't enjoy being there, that just adds to the pressure.
No, excellent. Thank you so much, my friend. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have you back on the platform in the future. And thanks to the audience. At this point, I'll hand over to Teach to take us through what's ahead.
Thank you, Fungai. Thank you, Mr. Derek, for that presentation. Thank you guys for the discussion. I guess everyone is taking home a lot of pointers from this discussion, and we are going to implement them in our workplaces, in our day-to-day operations. So yeah, it was a great session. Thanks to the network, we didn't have any issues today. But I would like to highlight to you guys, we are to complement these ESH webinars, the ESH e-launch webinars. We are going to launch an ESH magazine that will be free of charge, but full of knowledge. So the launch will be held on the 25th of June, and as a Zoom session as well. So everyone is welcome to participate in that session. The link and the flyer will be conveyed to you guys so that you can join. And for our upcoming session, we are going to be discussing about shutdown emergencies. As I have highlighted, we've declared this month a month of safety during shutdowns, and it has been highlighted that during shutdowns, that's when we experience most of the emergencies due to unforeseeable hazards that will lead to those incidents. So we are going to be having Mr. Simbarashe Magarira from Zimplus. He's going to be our guest for the next session, presenting on shutdown emergencies. So the session will be held on the 18th of June. That is next Friday after the following one. So we are looking forward for you guys to join in the session as well. So yeah, it was a great day. I would like to thank everyone for joining in, for participating in this session. And since we are now using technology, we cannot take a physical photo. So at this moment, I would like to ask everyone to turn on their cameras so that we can take a snap. Turn on your cameras, guys, so that we can take a pic.
Photo time.
Yeah. Say cheese.
Teach, do you need to stop sharing?
Oh,
Do you need to stop sharing your slides?
let me see if I can do that.
All right, so everyone, yeah, let's get our cameras on. This is how we get to meet in the time of COVID.
Yeah.
You know, Teach, are you taking the photo? You have to tell us to say cheese, and we can, you know,
Yeah. Say cheese, guys.
Cheese.
Say cheese. Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. I think we're
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you, guys. For the moment, I think you can take
Thank
this
you so
moment
much,
to just
everyone.
mingle, share different thoughts.
Mingling can be a bit tricky. With everyone talking at the same time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a safe
Thank you.
day.
Thank you.
Look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you all again. Thanks, Derek.
And thanks, Derek.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.